Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I am your host, Jim Nettles, and we are bringing in, well, some good favorites that we haven't drug out of the woodwork in a while. So, let's go around and see who is bringing in stuff to add to that to-be-read pile. So, Layla, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance. And tonight I'll be talking to you about Vagabond Tracks, which will be out next week.
Stuart?
Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Jaffe. I'm best known for the Max Porter Paranormal Mysteries, but that's not what I have new coming out. It just came out last week, I guess it was, which is a book called Dragonslain, and I'll tell you about that shortly.
And David?
I'm David R Slayton. I'm best known for White Trash Warlock and the Adam Binder Chronicles of Urban Fantasy, but today, Silent Paths of Night came out, so I'll be talking to you about that.
So, I always like to start with, let's just talk about what's the world we're stepping into. And since we've got a bunch of new stuff to play with here, let's just talk about the big world. What's the big setup? And then, when we go around next round, we'll talk about more about the characters and we'll dive deeper into the story. So, Layla, what world are we falling into this time?
Well, this was this year's Pride story. So, in the past, we've done the cruise, we've done the parade, we did the camp, which was last year. So this year, we decided to do trains. So all the books that every author's doing is set on a train, and they're going to meet on a train and all of that. So our book, Vagabond Tracks, which is myself writing with T.L. Travis, we decided to do just basically a pride train, and it's a huge rolling pride party on a train. And that's kind of our theme for this year. And the nice thing is, every year it seems like we have a different theme. So I get to come tell you something different every year.
Stuart, what world are we falling into with this one?
So Dragonslain is a new book, a whole new thing, nothing tied to any of the million other series I've written. And this is a fantasy horror novel. And if it sells well, it's the start of a fantasy horror series. And if it doesn't sell well, it's a beautiful standalone. The world that we enter has fallen apart. Long before the book begins, something happened and wiped out just about everything. But when that event happened, the magic users of some of the areas were able to create these walled nations, which is just what it sounds like. It's this giant wall around an entire country, but the wall is magic and it keeps out the evil. And his inside is like this pristine, beautiful, classic quasi-medieval fantasy world. But when they step out of there, it's a hellscape with lots of dragons.
Nice and cheerful. David, what's the big world we're stepping into this time?
Well, continuing in the vein of nice and cheerful, so The Silent Paths of Night is the follow-up to Dark Moon, Shallow Sea, in which the moon goddess was murdered, and her death stopped the tides, darkened the night sky, and left the ghosts of the dead without a path to the underworld. Wanting payback on the Knights of the Sun who killed her, her last worshiper breaks into their temple to steal a box. He thinks he'll find gold, jewels, something he can hawk. Instead, he finds another man sleeping inside. So, he steals Kinos. And if Rafe and Kinos can't figure out why he's in the box, the moon will never rise again. So that was the first book. Silent Paths of Night is the sequel. It focuses a lot more on Seth, the Knight of the Sun. Spoiler alert, at the end of Dark Moon, the moon is restored, but she doesn't come back alone. And unfortunately, the greater demon that orchestrated her death in return is, we still have the blood-hungry ghost mist from her death, the grief to deal with. And then on top of that, we have this ancient spirit of chaos that Rafe and Seth are trying to figure out how to kill, but how do you kill what's already dead? So, yeah, it's the world's a real upper of a place.
Well, it's time for good cheerful writing. It's that good light summer reading, right?
Dark, it's in the title. Does what it says on the label.
Truth in advertising. We can't have that. So, Stuart, I'm going to jump to you on this one, right? So let's dive a little bit deeper. Who are we going on the journey with?
Well, our main character is a woman named Lee Call, and when in the past, when she was about 20, she had joined the City Guard, which is the police military group of this walled nation, and a dragon somehow broke through the walls and attacked, and it was this bloody, horrible experience. And now it's 20 years later, so she's 40 and suffering from PTSD. She and her chief at the time, or commander at the time, are pretty much the only two from the squad that are still alive. Those that didn't die in the actual attack have some of them have taken care of themselves. Some have picked fights with the wrong people, but they've all just, their lives were in ruin, and a couple went insane. And basically, we're following her as she, her commander, ex-commander, basically comes up to her and says, "There's another dragon," and the king has basically said, "We're going to go get this dragon. It's me and a bunch of newbies who weren't even born when this happened the first time. They don't know what they're doing. I need somebody who actually knows what she's doing. And so you're coming with me." And obviously she doesn't want to, but ends up doing this. And so this group goes off into the Badlands, the Wastelands, and into this ruined city to find the cave where the dragon is. And as she's suffering through her this is, of course, very triggering to somebody with PTSD, but about halfway through the book, they confront the dragon, and the idea is not, she thinks it's to kill the dragon, but really they have a bunch of magic users with them. They freeze the dragon in ice and are going to bring it back so that the king can have the honor of killing the dragon. And this is a little bit, not a huge spoiler, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, you can do this for a moment. But this book is, when I was trying to come up with this action horror thing with dragons, and I couldn't quite find a way into it, the secret ingredient I found was rewatching the movie Aliens, where this group goes in and everything's kind of quasi-peaceful and scary but weird, and then they confront something, and then all hell breaks loose for the last half of the movie, and that's what happens here. They do capture their dragon, but they find out it's a mama dragon, and the babies ain't too happy, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So this is where the horror part of the book comes in. You can let go now if you want to.
So, in other words, it's going to be light and cheery.
I promise it's a horror movie. The question isn't will they survive? It's who could possibly survive.
So just tell me that all the newbies are wearing red armor. David, let's dive a little bit deeper. Who are we going on the journey with in the story this time?
So there's 2 points of view in this book. Just like the first one, they alternate between Moon and Sun. Moon being Rafe, who has, again, saved the world, made a change. He still is dealing with some of the fallout of the events in the first book. And then we're going on also with Seth, the Knight of the Sun. They are very different, and yet I like the way that their characters interlock. So Rafe is a little more cynical. He spent the first 13 years of his life raised in a temple, and he thought he was going to be a scholar, a priest. Then, when his religion was destroyed and his goddess murdered, he spent 10 years living as a thief on the streets, where he had no family, just a gang that he sometimes helped out with, very distrusting. By the end of book 1, all of that has changed. He knows who his parents are. Spoiler alert, one of them is alive and they have a good relationship. A lot of things have changed for him. And that is unsettling, right? His goddess is back, but he's the last worshiper. He's the last priest. He's trying to figure out how he could possibly bring the faith back into the world. especially a broken world that hates him. And on top of all of that, the world politics now begin to explode around him because of what he's done and the connections that he didn't know he even had. Things are getting really complex. On the other side, we have Seth, who in the first book was this very eager young knight of Hyperion, carrying his own secrets with his own past, things he was trying to suppress or purge from himself. His whole perspective has changed too by the end of the first book. And now we're really focusing a lot more on Seth and the Silent Past. We're focusing on his journey, his becoming, but also some of that earnest faith that got him through the first 25 years of his life. The shine's come off. Doubt is creeping in. And a knight of Hyperion derives their power, all of their ability to conjure the gods' fire, their strength, all of it comes from their faith. And if their faith should falter in battle, they usually die. So he's got some challenges in this book that are going to really put to the test everything he's believed up till now about the gods and himself. And we're going to dive a lot more into his origins and truth. So I really, this is really Seth's book. And I appreciate that because turns out he's a kind of a fan favorite character. So everybody's really like excited about it.
Layla?
Well, we start off in this book with Payton, and he is so excited because this is going to be his first train ride. He's going on vacation with, at the time when he leaves, he was planning on going on vacation with someone special. Spoiler alert, that doesn't work out the way he planned. However, play things by ear and see what happens. And then you have Stone, who is a former, rock star, because we somehow managed to segue sideways into rock stars without meaning to. So we've got kind of a ex-rock star this time. He's playing on the train platform, singing. He's got the guitar case open so folks can toss coins in. And I wouldn't necessarily, yes, I would call it a meet cute because it's actually utterly adorable, the first conversation that they have with one another. And it pretty much becomes do you want to go on a train ride? And yes, Stone does want to go on a train ride. And that train ride he ends up going on becomes the book and everything that happens afterwards.
So, and David, I'll start with you on this one. As writers, part of one of the most fun parts here, right, is what do we get to explore in the human experience as we're writing, as we're creating, as we're doing things. What was one of the most interesting or fun aspects of as you were going through, working through the characters, working through the story, whether it's something that actually made it in or not, whether it's something that, just regardless, what's something that kind of struck you in the writing and working through the story?
So when I first came up with Seth, in the early iterations of Dark Moon, he was a villain, and he was very much a stereotypical kind of villain. My writing hadn't gotten deep enough. I hadn't quite, learned how to do more layering and character work. But this funny little thing happened. I fell in love with him. And as I was writing him and exploring his character more, he sort of took on a life of his own beyond that. And he became much more than just this, what I would call a mustache twirler, like, wahaha, I am evil for evil's sake. But as I got more into he has a lot of self-tortured things about him. He has a lot of religious trauma. I have a lot of religious trauma, so I think that's why we ended up bonding. But for example, in the first book, he spends a lot of time punishing himself. The god's fire should not burn him because he is, the most devout worshiper of the sun god. And yet it does. So he constantly tests himself by burning himself to see how much he can withstand, to try to figure out why and to see if he can purge this impurity from himself. And originally that was part of this whole just like slightly crazed religious zealot mindset. But the more that I got to know him, the more I saw him not as an antagonist, but as another hero, just kind of a different side of Rafe's coin. So it really surprised me how alive he came on his own. And it's funny, it still shocks me because when readers read the books, they're like, oh my gosh, Seth. And like I said, he's a fan favorite. People love him. And it always surprises me because in my first iterations, he was this kind of cliche, empty shell sort of villain. And now he's taken on this whole thing. So I always love that weird alchemy that happens when you're writing a character and they just come alive and do something that you did not tell them to do. And it's like, hang on, that's not on script, but they're running off and doing it anyway. It's one of my favorite things because it keeps, no matter how much you try to plot, it keeps the writing from getting boring because your characters will surprise you.
Layla, how about for you?
Oh, absolutely. It was the same thing. My co-writer TL Travis and I are sitting here and we set out to write a Daddy Little book. That was the plan for this story. We did not expect our rock stars to be in here. And now our readers are going to see, a little glimpse of some rock stars from us, especially if they're familiar with TL's Social Centers and Maiden Voyage, because we've got a little appearance that I'm not going to tell you who it is. Just watch for it. You'll know when it happens. We didn't expect things to go this way, but now we've got a whole other, appearance that planned for Rocktoberfest. So our readers who read this one, they can pop back into Rocktoberfest. You'll kind of get a glimpse of some people again. We didn't expect things to tie in the way they did. I've never had one cross the Pride series into my Rocktoberfest or vice versa. So this was kind of a first. And it was so much fun because it was utterly unexpected. It just happened. And it happened based on a conversation that probably lasted about 3 minutes. And then we were off.
Stuart?
Well, I think one aspect is, obviously, I've mentioned that this is a fantasy horror book. And horror can be intense all the time. So one of the challenges when you're writing a horror novel is to find opportunities to give the reader even the briefest moment of relief. And so, a line that in a different book would be maybe worth a chuckle, funny little quip that somebody says or snarky reply, can become extremely funny if it's the only bit of humor you're getting in the last 3 chapters, and instead you've been getting terror and blood and running for your life. So finding those moments for these characters to express some other quality of their humanity other than fear and adrenaline rush was a challenge, because it's not a long book. It comes in, it does its job, and leaves. I try not to overstay my welcome in anything I write, but especially if it's meant to be fast-paced and action-oriented. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges in giving these characters that human touch, is just how they're making sure, because there's a lot initially. There's a lot in the group. I got to have people I can kill. And so I need to make, sometimes in some cases, I need to make them human and 3-dimensional very quickly, because we just met them and they're not going to last long. Somebody's got to die first. So
they're not going to be
finding those moments
for long.
It's a challenge. And whenever I do anything, but especially here, I've been a lover of horror for a long time, and I've written horror short stories, but I've never written an outright novel. I've had scary moments in books, but I've never written a novel where the purpose was to induce that fear. And so I read a lot more than I normally would read in a year, just to kind of familiarize myself with where things are now in the genre and all that. And I was reading some splatterpunk, and that stuff is just relentless. And that was kind of where I realized, oh no, it gets numbing after a while if you don't create some other emotion. So that's kind of where that all came from, to make sure
contrasts. It's funny how I talk about this a lot. Even if you're writing grimdark, there has to be glimmers of light. There has to be contrast. Otherwise, it just you lose. I get lost. I think you lose a lot of readers if there isn't some contrast. It's funny how much horror has little bits of humor through, even if it's not comedic horror, because it will. You have to know how to make those highs and lows.
Yeah. And there's more. I mentioned horror, humor, but there are other emotions you can. It's not the only emotion I go to for that kind of relief. But yeah, it's true in even in non-dark things. I mean, my whole Nathan K series, which is all just action thriller fantasy stuff. I try to adhere as best as possible to a traditional thriller structure, which is action reaction. So you have a chapter where it's all out action. The next chapter is a breath. Even if it's in the midst of everything, it's a breath to do something else before the action continues. And you see that in movies, and anybody who's doing an action piece knows to do that. And it's the same idea. Yeah, they're running for their lives and people are dying left and right, and blood and horror, and it's all triggering to all the PTSD and all that. But we're going to make a little joke here, or we're going to have a little thought of romance there, or something to just remember they're human. And I think, in fact, that not only gives the reader relief, but a little writer trick here is it also makes we care more, so that the next moment of horror is even more horrifying because we actually had a moment to identify with this person. So.
Yeah, because at the end of the world, I'm still probably going to be a smart ass.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In a kilt.
Yeah. Well, on brand, right? So I want to throw just kind of a quickie bonus question out there. And Layla, I'll start with you on this one. Is there a scene or something in there that got deleted or maybe is alluded to, but something made the cutting room floor, but something you kind of want people to maybe know about, but maybe not too spoiler?
No, actually. Nothing made the cutting room floor, but a whole lot of things made when we start working on the next book list, where we already had ideas to collect that we've been collecting that springboarded off this one. So nothing on the cutting room floor, but definitely more books now because of it.
That sounds very familiar. The whole notion of, well, we were doing this one-off and now it's going to be a 27-book series with.
Oops.
Yeah. Stuart, how about for you?
So in the opening chapters, before they actually go off on their adventure, Lee Call, our main character, is kind of laying low in a herbalist farm, which is basically the equivalent of obviously they're growing herbs and things, but it's for medical purposes. That's all their medicine that they have.
Medical purposes, yeah.
Well, there's those two. She's doing a lot of that.
Medicinal purposes, right?
That's part of why
representing from Colorado.
And
sorry.
So there are these scenes
representing from Massachusetts.
There are these scenes where she is pulled in. The lady who runs the whole thing. Her name, I can't remember if it was Lady Cutter, I think. But a lady calls her in to yell at her and say, you're not supposed to be smoking everything. You're supposed to be, this is for people who need it, who are ill, not for you. And Lady Cutter was really cool, and all these scenes really fleshed out her character. But she really was there just in the beginning and the end of the book, and is really not. She was getting a lot more time than she needed to be there. And as I tightened things up and started, realizing what was necessary and what wasn't, almost all of her got cut from the book, which was unfortunate because I really like her character. But you have to be willing to do that and to make the book better. And she was just slowing everything down because I was having fun with that character who really had no purpose in the book structurally other than to help establish some of the other characters who we were going on the trip with. And so I was like, all right, I can give her a few lines, but she doesn't get the 3 chapters I gave her or whatever it was. So, yeah, that was one of them.
David?
So I keep outtake folders for every book because I have certain ideas. And if you have met Vran from the Adam series or Rogue Community College, he is one of these. He's this idea that, he's always like, am I on yet? Am I on yet? And finally, when I was writing Trailer Park Trickster, he got to be on stage. I'm like, yes, get on here and get out of my head. Shut up. There is a sequence, a fantasy sequence that my brain has been trying to put into a book for a long time. And it almost made it into Silent Paths. And I just couldn't quite make it work with the pacing because it'll shift the pacing a little bit. But I'm writing the third and final book in the trilogy now. And so I'm working on how to fit it in finally and get it out of my damn brain because it's always in there going, am I on yet? Am I on yet? So characters will do that to me. And in this case, it's a whole sequence involving the Rayites, the worshippers of Rhea, who are very neutral and everything because, they're like, we're just here to heal the land and make the crops grow. We don't want part of all this. We will finally get to see more of them in book 3. And this whole sequence with Rafe interfacing with them will finally bring a little more light to them. And I can finally take this concept I've had for a while and get it on the page.
Well, let's make sure everybody knows where to find all these and add them to that, stack them up on that summer reading pile. So, Layla, where can everybody find you? Website, social media, and of course, remind them the name of the book.
Well, you can find me at Layla Dorine, author at Wix.com, Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms, which is my blog, Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Musings, which is also one of my social media pages, Blue Sky, Instagram, and I'm going to try to do better at TikTok. The book is Vagabond Tracks. It's co-written with T.L. Travis, and it will be available next week.
Stuart?
You can find me at stuartjaffe.com. I have a Patreon. Stuart, you can just put in Stuart Jaffe and it'll come up. And the book is called Dragonslain. It's out now. If you can't spell that, because apparently some people are having trouble, just put in dragons and my name. It'll come up. Because it is the only book called Dragonslain, which blew me away. But for now, at least.
Well, until it becomes a series and,
Dragonslain 2.
More slain.
More slain.
David?
As somebody with the word slay in his name, it's amazing how many people can't, slay a ton, as in slay a ton of people, and then they'll put the A in. So yeah, I get you. Let's see. So the Silent Paths of Night is available everywhere right now. It's in audio, ebook, everything. I'm from Blackstone, so you can find me at Barnes & Noble. But if you can't remember my name, you can't remember the book, just remember White Trash Warlock. That's my first book, and that's pretty memorable.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here, ConTinual. And go stack up those to-be-read piles. You got a lot to do this summer.